While the cold store company in Auckland, where one worker has tested positive for COVID, is Americold New Zealand, its employees, contractors and anyone who has visited their Mt Wellington site in the past 2 weeks have now been ordered to stay at home. The special direction issued by the Director General of Health in the last hour also applies to the families of those people who must now self-isolate until they are contacted by the Ministry of Health's tracing team. Now, joining me now from Melbourne is Americold's Managing Director, Richard Winnall. Thanks for joining us, Richard. I mean, what does the stay-at-home order mean for your staff and the business?
Yeah, hi there, Lisa. Firstly, what a shock to the system for all of us. We were advised last night after business closed by the Ministry of Health of the closure, and immediately we read that as a 48-hour closure, and so our attention went straight to our employees, getting them notified and supporting them through a testing and communication process with the Ministry. So, obviously business being closed for 48 hours is one thing, and then how we restart is another. But, first up, it's just the priority of our employees and getting them settled and their concerns allayed during this process.
So potentially with them self-isolating for 2 weeks, does that mean you're shut down for that whole time?
We're taking direction on that. What I think it appears for us at this stage is these employees will have to self-isolate for 14 days. At a certain point, we will get clearance to bring in other staff who potentially haven't been exposed or don't come into any contact tracing evidence and be able to bring them in to resume operations at the site. So we're still testing that theory, and we're hoping perhaps by the weekend that we can bring some normality back into that operation.
Richard, how many staff are you talking about at that site?
27 in total, so obviously the one in question with the positive COVID case, and then another 26 who are self-isolating and testing today.
So how was that, or how is that worker who is tested positive for coronavirus, and when was he last on your site?
He was last on the site about 9 days ago. He had the very good judgment of recognising an illness and isolating himself from work, so we applaud him for that, and I think that's making perhaps the contact tracing work a lot easier. So we haven't had him there for 9 days. However, there is a potential risk that there was transmission before he left. We haven't got evidence of that yet, so that's what the testing is all about. So that's what we know so far. By the way, we have been in contact with him today. We believe he's going okay.
So you have other locations as well, don't you? In Auckland?
Yes, we do.
So
we've got three other locations in Auckland. One other of those locations has been ordered to be shut by the Ministry of Health, which is in the Auckland Airport precinct. I don't believe there's any evidence that leads to that site being shut from a contact tracing or any other evidence point other than its geographic location, and a precautionary step by the Ministry of Health.
And how long's that for, Richard?
We believe that will be no longer than 48 hours. All employees, 20 employees at that site being tested today. As soon as those results are back in, assuming they're clear, we'll be back to full operations again.
Okay, so just in terms of your business, so people understand this, you're like a cool store logistics style company. So a couple of things here. Do you have workers who travel overseas or people who have come into your business who've had exemptions to get through the border?
Yes, so we're a global temperature-controlled logistics business. We run and operate large freezer and chiller warehouses for primarily the food logistics business. In answer to your question, Lisa, since phase one of COVID, the global pandemic, we have not had anyone in our business flying in or out of New Zealand.
So what is actually going on at the site then? Because the Ministry of Health has not yet ruled out the potential for the virus to come in on product. Is there any testing happening there?
Okay, so the site is shut. There's none of our employees in there. We're working with the Ministry of Health on, I believe, some swab work to rule out that there's been any transmission through product movement. We think that is improbable. We haven't got any other evidence around our global supply chain of that occurring, but it's an obvious place to look and to rule out as well in this case.
So do you have goods coming from the US and Australia, Melbourne or any of those areas which have got high rates of COVID?
Yes, so the origin of some of these goods, I can't tell you straight away. I think there's a very large proportion of locally manufactured food in that facility, and there is a proportion of imported product. I can't tell you where it's been located, but it has come through typically a slow sea freight supply chain process. And I think as we work with the Ministry of Health on that, I think we'll probably come to rule that out as being an imported issue.
Right, so you're waiting for the swabs on the goods. So you've got all this product there and you supply people here in New Zealand. What's happening with your supply chain and your customers then? Because presumably their products are locked down right now.
Yeah, so I think we're fortunate. The food supply chain does have a lot of inventory sitting in it. From the grocery store, albeit there's a large pull coming on that, but back into the retailers have large distribution centres where they hold and pre-assemble goods for those stores, and then back into some of the manufacturers that sit behind that retail distribution network. So if you add all of that up, there's many, many weeks of supply typically in the food supply chain. So if we're looking at a 48-hour stoppage only, I don't think that will be felt by the end consumer.
Richard, you mentioned you haven't had any workers travelling overseas. I'm wondering, do you have any frontline airport workers like customs or border control who enter your work environment or you mix with them?
No, we don't. Obviously, there are government departments that come and look at our food quality standards and related quality protocols. But no, there's none of our employees who are moving back and forth between airport and that front line. No.
Thanks for joining us this evening. That is the Managing Director of Americold, Richard Winnall, and his business is one of the ones where there's been a positive case of COVID.